I'm now going to go on to part two of my talk, which is looking at the events in 2009 and the storyline for that. And also looking at the relationship to what the ICTY, the findings of the ICTY with respect to Srebrenica. Now, what happened in Srebrenica, or the relevant points for us in the findings of the ICTY, was that Srebrenica was a strategic location. It was important for the Serb forces to capture it and to ethnically cleanse it of the Bosnian Muslims. And one way that, and two of the things that stood out was effectively that they did capture it. And after capturing it, they killed, massacred. The Srebrenica massacre is a massacre of 8,000 men and boys, and subsequently the women were deported. So the area, as far as the ICTY was concerned, the key issue was whether the population, the Bosnian Muslim population in Sri Lanka, in Srebrenica, could be reconstituted in the way that it existed before the attack, before the massacre. And because it couldn't be reconstituted that way, it was an ethnic cleansing, it was a genocide. And so basically you've destroyed a community, you have moved them out, forced them to migrate, you've killed a certain subsection of them in such a way that you can't reconstitute that community after the war. And we would say that this is exactly the approach that one would take to the Vanni. And we would look at the similarities. Firstly, that the state, the Sri Lankan state, forced civilians into a safe haven. So was Srebrenica a safe haven. But here, Srebrenica was UN declared, and this was unilaterally a safe haven of the Sri Lankan government. The safe haven was then attacked. And we've mentioned this before, that civilians have been also in past instances in Sri Lanka moved into small locations for efficient killing, into crowded areas for efficient killing. And then the surviving population was interned in camps. So they were literally forced out, interned in camps. Now, if we look at the statements of the state, of the government, initially the internment in the camps was indefinite. And only went to 3 years, and there was international pressure that brought it shorter. But there was not initially the intention that the people should, or the community should be reconstructed in the way that it existed before. And the question is, can it be reconstructed that way, given the high casualty figures? So those are the steps. I mean, we look at this as government deliberately setting about to ethnically cleanse or empty an area in the same way, for example, as we look in the Second World War with respect to Poland, to empty the area of a particular ethnic group and to move in a different group. Okay, so the test is, can the Tamil population of the Vanni be reconstructed in the way that it existed before the war? And has the government the will to do that? Right? And we would say to both, no, because of the high casualties. Right? The key points, some of the key points to remember is that the Tamils moved to the Vanni in 1995 following the state's attack on Jaffna. That's the voluntary movement. They were a long-term refugee population. They rebuilt their lives from scratch. The Vanni was a net exporter of food products, rice, for example, certain food products, by 2007. But in 2009, during the war, it faced starvation. And when we look at the embargoes and the conditions that brought that about, as the state troops moved northward from the south, people fled before them deeper into LTT-held areas. So the government was effectively, of course, people chose to move deeper northwards, but the government was effectively bringing them closer and closer into a small space. And that territory, it was the government that declared the safe zone. It was unilateral. They chose the spot, and then they proceeded to bomb the safe zone. Right? But more interestingly, the most interesting part of this for me is that Mr. Rajapaksa, the president, gave an interview to the Hindu on the 30th of June, where he more or less described this as a military strategy. He said to the Hindu, it was not the LTT who actually selected the place. The armed forces made them go there. The no-fire zones were all announced by the armed forces. So he's saying effectively that the military chose the safe zone. It was a military decision. And it was therefore not a safe zone. It was the military's choice of the final battle to which they forced all the civilians to go. Right? So he said the whole thing was planned by our forces to corner them. But of course, the point is that the civilians were also forced to go to that location. It was not just a military strategy. And as to why, how can we say the civilians are forced? It's very clear from the statements of the defense minister, who said that nothing must exist outside the safe zone. And he said that in relation to the hospitals all around the surrounding areas being bombed. So the hospitals, food distribution points, anything that made it possible to live outside the safe zone was bombed. Because Gotabaya Rajapaksa said nothing must live outside the safe zone. So effectively, and of course the people in the region were 100% Tamil, so it was an effective cleansing, ethnic cleansing of that region, outside of the region, out of the Valley, into the safe zone, and then they were killed in the safe zone. So it's pretty clear what the objective was. It was to empty the Valley of that population. So that is my sort of general storyline, where you can see the parallels with the ICTY, where the ICTY would put the test case: can you reconstitute that population in the way that it existed before? And was one of the intentions of this whole war to empty the territory of people, of Tamil people? And we would say yes. And so I will now go to my third point, which is simply concluding with the Indian state's responsibilities in respect to this.